Up to the 5 o'clock turn now, and lots more happening, especially here, as you can see, where Kniphausen's wing has kind of split up all over the place. Here, kind of forming a line like that along there, are Grant and his 1st and 2nd regiments of foot, and also this battalion from the 71st, the one that is able to approach the enemy, and not the other one. I think it's the 1st of the 71st. The 2nd battalion of the 71st has to stay 8 hexes away from enemy units because they're guarding the supply train. But as you can see, these guys are kind of scattered all over. They ended up crossing Gibson's Ford, something that I initially had no plans to do, until I realized that the American position over here was content to just sit back, hide from the British cannons, and wait for the Brits to simply run out of time. The victory conditions are the Brits have to inflict 105 points of damage on the American forces before the 8:40 turn, where they lose. And I'll make sure that I believe that's the only condition. It's either sort of all or nothing. They either get to that point barrier or they don't. The Americans win the instant the British eliminated it. SP and leader total reaches or exceeds 70. The British win the instant the American total exceeds 105. If both of the sides reach those numbers simultaneously, the game's a draw. If neither side reaches those levels by the end of the 8:40 p.m. turn, the Americans win. So it's on the Brits to inflict casualties. And the problem is the Brits have been losing a lot of casualties. And in fact, up as of 5 o'clock turn, the Brits are up to 41 strength points lost. So they can only lose another 30 and they're done. So that's, given that Cornwallis, his wing, has not yet even assaulted Sullivan's and Alexander's wings up north, it's not looking good that they're going to avoid that 70-point threshold. However, the British have been able to inflict 45 losses on the Americans, which has actually started to affect their morale. The Americans have failed a morale check roll. One of the ways I was able to get to that was the American position here. These are the normal American troops, like your regulars, Continental Army regulars, with some state troops in there. These guys down here that were guarding this far left position around the Rocky Hill, you can see these guys here. These are all of the militia units, and that's their commander is Armstrong, I believe, who's commanding all of the Maryland or Pennsylvania militia. It's all of its militia. So these are fairly poor quality troops for the Americans. And what originally I was doing was, they were all lined up here, and I originally had them to start filing back along this road. Well, I realized with the Brits, those troops would probably be my best chance to get some cheap points off of the Americans, of going against their worst troops. So before they got too far down the road, I quickly swung Grant's forces down here, as quickly as you can do anything in this game, which is not very. Got him down here, had him cross at Gibson's Ford, and then, as opposed to running away with the militia, which in retrospect I probably should have done, I opted to turn around and engage, because I thought, if I can get the militia down at this end as they're crossing this ford, then I can move the regulars up here, up closer, to try and get the Brits caught out between two forces. Unfortunately, the militia broke a lot faster than I thought they would. Grant rightly turned his forces towards the militia rather than these guys over here, and hit them pretty hard. So as you can see, there's some back here. I think I had these guys actually just retreat back a hex. These guys over here just recovered from a rout. These guys here have just been sort of held in check by the Queen's Rangers, who were too small to melee against them. I did get one lucky break with one of the militia stacks during a melee and got a mutual rout. So the 55th Regiment and one of the Queen's Rangers detachments ended up running, and they have not yet recovered. Here, I believe these guys are just about to fight with Grant's forces there. And then as you can see over here, a couple of other routed stacks. But I was able to pick up a lot of points. I eliminated, at least 2 regiments or 2 battalions of the militia. Yeah, two of them eliminated from the 1st and 2nd Pennsylvania militia, and it is Pennsylvania militia. So that's where this stands. The problem is it's kind of scattered Grant's forces. Now here, this 71st Battalion will be very useful because they're big. It's a 10 strength point battalion, so they'll be useful probably at anchoring the flank over here as the Americans get closer. Unfortunately, the rest that's across the ford here, this is all of the basically combat ineffective 1st Regiment. They're not going to be very useful. There's Nipphausen himself here. As for the Hessians, I figured, I can't cross everybody at Grant's Ford because these guys will just get hemmed in too easily here. So I went ahead and had the Hessians cross at Chad's Ford to try and take out this artillery position, which is just, I should point out, beating the shit out of them as they cross Chad's Ford. So these Hessians, I think these guys up here that are in disorder, they're down to half strength at this point, and that was out of 11 strength points. So you get the idea. This artillery fire from over here at this range is just ruinous. Fortunately, they are now out of the arc of fire of those guys, so they'll have to kind of prolong. But if they do that, then they're going to open themselves up to these guys getting closer. So I am going to be able to get up on that position. Question is how many more points am I going to lose along the way. As you can see, I've started moving some American units from this grouping over here over to engage the Hessians. They should be able to hold the Hessians back pretty easily, which is too bad because the Hessians are big. They have artillery, but they've just been so whittled down just trying to get across the ford here. In retrospect, probably should have moved Grant's guys across and attacked with the Hessians over here just because they're bigger, but, I don't know. That's sort of 6 of one, half dozen of the other at this point. I don't think either side here can do very much effective. Grant, they did what they were supposed to do, which was get a lot of strength points off of this militia, and they should hopefully still get some more before they start getting engaged by the American regulars, at which point they'll probably have to just form up a defensive line or retreat back across the ford because they're just going to be too shot up to defend much at that point. Question is, will the Americans up here break and have what happened historically end up happening here, where the Brits end up running all the way down here and slamming into the American position? Frankly, the way the movement rules work in this game, I just don't see how that's possible. This is just too much ground for units, even in road column, because the quickest road they could take would be this one here, which only goes about halfway, and they got to cross a bunch of rough terrain before they can get to another road. It's just, and with 4 movement points, even in march column, through clear terrain, you can move pretty quickly, but not through forests and up these steep slopes and everything. Just, I don't know how this could ever play out historically in the time that's given to get all these British troops here to break the American line and then get all the way down across that map down to here to hit the American position, which is what happened historically. They were fighting down here by 7:40 or 8 o'clock as it was getting dark. I just don't see how the British forces up here could even get halfway across this map, even without the American forces up here fighting them every step of the way. First there's going to be this big engagement. These two forces haven't even hit each other yet. As you can see, the Brits are coming in force. I'm kind of focusing on the right portion of the American line here. But they've got this huge line, and I got to put some kind of right flank out, which is going to consist of the guard of the British, to keep the American position from swinging this line around and getting around on the British flank. So, but these forces haven't even engaged yet, and we're at 5 o'clock. And the way firing and melee works here, it's going to be a long fight. This is not a insignificant American position. This is just about half of the American army up here. So it's not insignificant. The British forces, although are pretty big, but they're already starting to take casualties as the artillery hits them. So, will these British forces that get up here, they could all be at half strength by the time they even get up to the line here to fight. So, I don't know. It's a prepared American position on defensible slopes with rough terrain to get through. I just don't see how the British are going to be able to break it. But yeah, we will give it a try and see what happens. So we're up to the 5:40 turn, and the scenario at this point is, for all intents and purposes, over. The British lose when they reach 70 strength points lost, and they are currently sitting at 62. The Americans, by contrast, are at 40. And they have to lose 105 strength points to lose this scenario. So, in the next, just from fire combat, in the next probably 2 turns, the British will lose those 8 points. And it was, things had started to change, but really I didn't help myself by getting aggressive down here, which what we're looking at right now is the general mess that is Grant's 2 units, or 2, battalions, regiments, brigades. Grant has the 1st and 2nd Brigades of Kniphausen's wing. The Hessian Brigade is over here, crossing the Brandywine, and then slowly working their way through the swamp. Mainly because they have to go through the swamp here. You can see these 2 units here, or 3 units rather, are all stuck in the swamp. They had to do it to stay out of the range or the arc of this cannon here, which has not yet turned to face them. I guess it would... Not sure if there's an entrenchment there, and I don't know if they would get the benefits of the entrenchment if they were firing along a vertex with the entrenchment only on one side, because the entrenchment here is only on these 2 hex sides. It does not extend back to this hex side, and if the cannon rotated to face that way, that would be right along the vertex of non-entrench and entrench. So I'm not sure exactly how that would work in terms of fire combat for the strength point modifiers, or close combat for that matter. Although the idea is to be coming in behind the cannon. But had these guys not crawled through the swamp here, they would have just marched up in open terrain here, and the scenario would be over already. They would have lost way more than 8 points just on this approach to this artillery. Which leads to one of my criticisms, is that the artillery seems overpowered to me. You're looking at a for strength points for field artillery, something like a ×8 strength modifier for artillery at range of 1 or 2, which is going to just annihilate, if you're shooting into clear terrain, it's going to annihilate anybody coming at them. And the problem is, with opportunity fire being what it is, you've got essentially 2 shots, and that's before defensive fire happens. You've got 2 shots at that 8 × 4, so you're looking at a 3-to-1 shot into clear terrain twice. And it doesn't help that I've been rolling, like, again, everything seems to be like in the 80s and 90s that I'm rolling for the Americans, so just over and over again, which is crazy. But nonetheless, I roll what I roll. So the overall losses from that, maybe ×8 seems too strong to get it up to that 3-to-1. Maybe it should be more like a 2-to-1 shot, which is still a pretty good advantage. You're going to at least do a point. Is that when you get into 3-to-1 and you roll well, you're getting into multiple strength point losses. And against units the size of most of the units in this scenario, and probably in the other, probably the same in Monmouth too, any American Revolution scenario, you're just going to be losing whole units from one artillery shot, which seems off to me. I mean, these, yes, there were casualties in these battles, but the small scale of them, they just weren't massive bloodbaths. I don't think the casualty rates for the number of units engaged is close to what it was for, say, Civil War era casualty rates, where you had rifles just doing devastating damage to the enemy. So the artillery, and certainly artillery, should be devastating up close. You should at least lose 1, maybe 2 strength points on an approach. But the idea that a whole unit would be physically eliminated on just simply from opportunity and defensive fire, I don't know. It seems doubtful to me that would be what would happen. Now, you might get, you've got increased chance of rout. I mean, these units would disintegrate and run away. But the idea that, every last person in a regiment or a battalion is a casualty just seems a little too high octane for this particular scenario. So I don't know, because it was just hard for the British to move and close and engage without just taking piles of casualties, which, again, it just doesn't seem very accurate to me. And a big part of the problem, again, for the British too, is that they could not use road column to move along the roads. So, because any artillery hits would just be devastating, and so that was part of why I slowed down here. When I first took on the light infantry over here, and the drawback to not being able to use road movement is your road column is you can't use road movement. When you're just in march column, you can't use road movement. And a big problem is anytime you do a facing change and you're not in road column, even though you're on a road, it costs you a movement point. So, you're on a hex grid like this where you have to face a hex side when you're in column, you're having to do a facing change every single movement that you're doing. Now, in road column, you can ignore facing change requirements as long as you stay on the road, meaning that, a unit moving along the road, this is fine. You're looking at hex side here. There's no facing changes there. So, if you start here, your guy moves, he can move, on road movement, you can move up to, on a minor road, you can move a half movement point for every 2 hexes. And then you don't have to do facing changes. So if you're on road column, you can go half, move the camera up a little bit, half, 1, 1.5, 2. All of that just gets you don't have to worry about facing changes. But when you're in just a march column, you move there, you don't get the road benefit. So you move in march column, you're just moving in clear terrain. You're looking at a half point per hex. So this would be, half point, 1 movement point. But now you're facing this way, so you got to face this way now to follow the road. So you go 2 to change your facing. So you start here. So it's 1, 2 to change facing, 3, 3.5. Up, and now you got to face that way, and that's going to cost you another point. But your movement points are 4, so you're stuck here. You have to stop here. So that just in march column, it takes forever to move along a road, because when you get somewhere, a road like this where you're having to constantly change facing just to follow the hex grid, it just becomes prohibitively expensive to move anywhere if you're not in road column. But the British can't be in road column because they'll get shot to pieces by American artillery. So I ended up just kind of cheating it. I allowed march column. They didn't get the road movement benefit for being on a road, but I went ahead and gave them the free facing changes. It just made things, and actually I ended up using it more with the Americans, actually. These guys here, moving along this road and then over to the Great Road to come over here and try and fight off the Hessian Brigade, I just gave them, even though they were all in, well, I guess I could have put all of these guys eventually in road column, because they're Americans, they don't have to worry about it. But I ended up, in fact, I think I did that completely wrong the whole time. I think I had them in march column, just forgetting that, the Americans don't have to worry about not being in road column, because I don't remember moving anybody 3, and these guys don't have any road column markers on them. So, and I don't remember moving, on the Great Road here, you can move 3 hexes per half movement point. So regardless, I think I had him in march column and was just doing the half per thing. But I was giving him free facing changes on the road. So I don't know. It just seems more, because of the way the hex grid works out, it seems like you're getting unfairly penalized for facing changes when you're moving along the contour of a road. So I think in march column you should get those free facing changes if you're on a road. Now you shouldn't get them just in regular terrain, but you should get them on the road. So I did that, and I used it some for the British up here. Some of them approached along these various roads here towards the Birmingham Hill. And so where things are at right now, as you can see, just kind of a mess down here with Grant's 2 brigades. Now fully across, you can see one of them there is routed. They had Grant with them. That was these guys here. They got shot up by some of the militia. I mean, they did rout 2 of the militia regiments and eliminated 2. So they did a lot of damage, but they finally, their losses caught up to them. And so that particular, the 5th, I think it's the 5th Regiment of Foot there, ended up routing. Over here, they're holding their own, but they're kind of messed up and disordered in these woods here. This is the 1st Battalion of the 71st. They ended up routing an American unit, these guys here, who had Green with them, who couldn't save them in close combat. So they ran off. But the 71st, that was a 10 strength point regiment. I think they lost 1 or 2 points from fire in close combat. But they managed to I think they're disordered. The disordered marker might be under the commander there. And I thought, I could have sworn that I read after close combat you automatically disorder when you advance after combat. And then I read the advance after combat rules again and I didn't see it in there. So I'm trying to remember where I saw that. I thought you always disordered after advancing after combat, but apparently not, because now I can no longer find where I thought that was in the rules. So up here, Nash has now unlocked or unfrozen. I'm going to move him down here. Again, this is all academic. It'll be over long before he ever gets into any sort of position. Here, if these Americans here get to go first, they're going to end up just doing some real damage to the, I could get these guys over here and hit these general order Hessians coming out of the swamp there, get the gun trained on them. I suspect a lot of the 8 points are going to come right from the Hessian Brigade. But we'll see. Up here, the British did finally launched the attack on the Birmingham Hill position. Really more over here at the meeting house is where they were able to engage closer. And you can see they're already working their way around the American right flank here. And these are pretty small units that are defending around the meeting house. One of them was eliminated here. You can see those Jagers right there. Those guys, I may just set the camera down here to look at the line. The Jagers, they're not the greatest quality troops, but it turns out they were only fighting against a 1 strength point unit, which I realized I should have stacked these guys the American defenders a little bit deeper. The guys here in the graveyard have all kinds of special bonuses, so they ended up routing their attackers, which you can see these guys back here who failed their rally check, so they're still shaken and disordered. They made their rally check, so they're shaken and disordered. But you can see the 4th regiment coming up here, or the 4th brigade rather, coming up here, and they're going to work their way around the flank. But again, all this doesn't really matter a whole lot because things will be well decided, I think, before we get too far around that American flank. There was a success there. I managed to destroy an artillery battery right here. These guys, got raked pretty badly with close range artillery fire coming up the hill. But the Hessians and the light infantry got in on either side of the cemetery. Now next up, the light infantry will try and break these guys. The Jagers will invade or will attack here, and then some of these guys will start hitting this right regiment. This guy back here in reserve, this is one of the leftover light infantry units from the initial engagement on the other side of the Brandywine. Marched his way all the way up here. So there's only 1 strength point left for this guy, so he's not going to be very effective. Further down the line, the Grenadiers engaged, and that was these guys here. And I brought them up in attack column. I thought I'd see how attack column worked. Turns out it works pretty well. With the one disadvantage is that you're enfiladed on your first combat, which gives the defender a +3, which kind of eliminated their combat advantage, which was unfortunate. At least going up slope. Certainly going up slope, because going up slope that you lose 2 points. Or I think it's maybe you lose a combat strength value going up a gentle slope, and then 2 strength value going up a regular slope. This guy, fortunately, he didn't have to fight up a slope, but he also came up an attack column and pushed his way through. And you can see the 2 regiments. Hazen's regiment was one of these, and unfortunately, they on their defensive fire or their opportunity fire got a special result that left them disordered, which is kind of devastating. Had they not been disordered, they may have been able to hold because they're a pretty big unit. And the attacking Grenadiers got disordered on the defensive fire, which halved their, they have like 11 strength points, but that got halved because they were disordered going into the close combat. So it actually would have evened the odds for Hazen's regiment had they not also been disordered. So, just a bad run of luck there for Hazen. Probably almost certainly would have held had they not gotten that fluke fire special result that disordered them. These guys, on the other hand, the 6th Pennsylvania never really had a chance. I think they're only a 4 strength point unit. And their attacking Grenadiers were not disordered. Or maybe they were. I guess if they're disordered now, they must have gotten disordered on the defensive fire. So I think both of those Grenadiers were fighting at half strength. But, against 4 strength points, they've got a little better chance than against 6. So, and they weren't coming up slope either. So, anyway, that was, I think, all the close combat on that line. However, coming up on the next turn, all of these columns will probably, I think, except maybe the guy who has to go through the bramble. But, I think an attack column, you still only have to move. You get a half point. I think it's just a 1 point through a bramble, plus half going up a regular slope. So yeah, so they should all be up on the line and ready to engage, assuming they don't get hit with opportunity fire that ends up disordering them. Over here, these guys are taking much longer to work their way up. And I think I've been it's been kind of a struggle to keep people in command up here. And it was also a struggle down south. As you can see here, the artillery, this field artillery, used the road to approach, so they got there a lot closer. This other artillery back here going overland. I don't know how the Brits managed to get their artillery up and firing on this line in the amount of time that they had from when the attack started. It just seems impossible to me. So, you're dealing with an attack that's launching essentially at 4 or 5 o'clock. I think those guys start coming on around 4 to get the artillery up there. I mean, and again, you can't use road column because the American artillery positions will just destroy you. So you end up having to move overland, and that's a point. That's one movement point in clear terrain for artillery that's limbered. I just don't see how you could ever get them into position before launching your infantry attack and still have any time left at all to not only take out the infantry position here, but then also get all the way down here and hit this infantry before it gets dark. It just seems just physically impossible within the limits of the game. At least if you want to have supporting artillery for the Brits. So I just left the artillery behind and launched the infantry attack, which seems to be going fine without the artillery. So how the Brits got their artillery in position and firing historically, no idea. According to the game, I mean, just getting your artillery up and in position, it's going to be 6 o'clock, by the time you're up there. So, I don't know. So anyway, this British attack is, these are big, beefy, +5 combat value units, like with the Grenadiers or the I think the light infantry is maybe a +4. I don't know if they're all as high as +5, but hitting some pretty small units. There's some bigger American infantry units on this end of the line. I really should have put some up by the meeting house. I don't know what I was thinking there, or some kind of reserve. I was trying to get a long enough line to make the British forces have to spread their units out too, because if they bunched up too much and just hit one narrow part of the line, then the Americans could have kind of swept around and gotten on their flanks. But as it turns out, the Brits are hitting pretty decisively and pretty hard. So we'll see what happens if they can break more of that line. Again, it's not going to make any difference. The British are still going to lose, and they're probably going to end up losing it down here. This is just poor. A poor strategic choice on my part or tactical choice to move Kniphausen out of there. I should have just backed him up, hit him in the woods so that the American artillery couldn't hit him, waited until the attack hit up there, and then maybe try to do something with Kniphausen down here. But I got greedy thinking that I could catch these weak militia units out of position, and now I'm just kind of in a big swirling mess in the woods down here. And just continuing to lose more strength points that I can't afford to lose for the British. So I'll do one more video to do a final wrap up, see what further progress the British can make before they hit that 70-point threshold, and we'll take it from there.